So now today what we're going to see is, we'll see how we can pass through the data. So anytime when you're talking about the information that you're going to send inside your project, which is basically any data flow that you're going to talk about, right? So any kind of data that you want to send it inside your project, you're going to use a concept called variables. Okay, so what are variables? Now I'm going to go to a shop, I'm buying fridge, I'm buying a washing machine, I'm buying a mobile phone, or say a laptop. Everything comes with the relative boxes, right? So you'll have a fridges box, you'll have a washing machines box, and you'll have the other items box also, right? So when you want to sell it back, or when you're shifting to another new place, so what you're going to happen, you can shift it just with the product, or for the safety purpose, what you're going to do, you're going to put it inside the same box and you will be shifting it, right? So similarly, you won't be able to put a washing machine inside a fridges box, or you won't be able to put a fridge inside a washing machine's box. See, the problem is it will fit in. If your washing machine is going to be much smaller, so it will definitely fit inside a fridges box. But unfortunately, when you're shifting it, there's too much of space. Inside the box, there'll be too much of space. There's a chance of it getting repaired, or it getting having an issue while transporting or something like that. So similar to this, we are going to have, so what is the problem is, you need to have the perfect box. Suppose say you need to put a laptop inside a fridges box, it's not going to be a certain thing that we will be doing, right? So similar to that, you need to make sure that you have the right boxes to showcase or to insert your right products, right? Similar is your concept. So why we have these boxes? The boxes will make it more, make your product more, it'll just not help. I mean, it'll just help in the product getting transported safely, right? So this is what is the idea of having your box. So it is more of safety, it is more of information that your product will be coming as you are sending the same kind of a product you will be receiving, right? So similar will be the concept of a variable. So here what we do is, we are going to use boxes to hold the data. So depending on the data, just like a fridge, just like a washing machine, you might have different kinds of data, right? So the different kinds of data is going to be put under different boxes. Suppose you say you have two fridges. You need to say one is an LG fridge, one is a Samsung fridge, means you would have a box verified outside, right? You will have the name of the box written outside, right? So you have to put on the LG fridge inside the LG fridges box only, so that it will hold it perfectly, right? So you cannot interchange and put. So similar is the information inside the variables also. So if you have the same kind of data that you're going to put, you can hold it in two different boxes, but put it in the right box. So which means the same kind of a fridge box, but the names will be given. So the boxes are called the variables. Okay. So what we are going to do is, we are going to use the concept of variables to hold the data. Variables are nothing but the boxes that will hold your data based on the type of data that you're going to get. Okay, so the type of data could be anything different. It could be just alphabets, it could be just kind of numbers that you might be receiving, it could be kind of more information that you might be receiving. So how do we actually store your data? So why do we need to store your data? Because in your program, the program won't be able to hold your data for a very long time. Okay, say for example, we are going from one box to another in your workflow, right? So what happens when it goes from one box, whatever it's doing in the first box, if you're doing some manipulation, say you're doing A plus B. So what will happen, this A plus B, whatever is your result set, when it goes to your, say A plus B is 20, the answer. Okay, when it goes to the next box, if you're not putting, I mean, next, the next activity of your workflow, if you're not holding it inside a variable, this 20 will be disappearing inside your program. Okay, it will be lost, right? So always you need to hold the data inside the variable boxes, so that you will be able to see the data starting from the execution of the project to the end of the project. Okay, so that the data will be held inside the program for proper execution of the program. That is why we require variables. Now, what do we have in a variable? So variables are nothing but boxes, as I said. So you can have the same variable boxes, right? So obviously you need to give a name to the box, right? So we have a variable name. Then we have the type of box, whether it is fridges box or washing machines box or whatever. And then we have, in case we are going to have any default thing put inside it. So any default number or default data put inside it, you're going to have the default value. So this is how your syntax of a variable will be. You will have the box name, you will have the box type. And in case you're going to put some product inside it, then that particular product's information. This is not a mandatory field. Okay. Now, what other kind of information can we handle? We can handle, what we do is we take the same Microsoft .NET concepts or any programming concepts. Okay. All programming technologies will have these basic variable types. Okay. Because every program handles data. So these basic data types or variable types only are going to be used inside UiPath also. So which is, even if you're learning Python, then you will be using the same thing. If you're learning .NET, so basically these are .NET variable types, but it is across every other language, you will be seeing the same variable types defined. Okay. Maybe the name could be different, but almost you will be having the same variable types. Now, right. So what kind of data can we get? The first data that you can get is anything that is in the form of alphabets, like your name, like your, your employee name, or your student name, or your subject name. So all those things could be part of your address. All those things could be part of alphabets, right? So those kind of information you could get, or you could get any kind of employee ID information. Those comes as a part of numbers information, right? So anything in the form of date of joining or date of exit. So anything in the form of date, right? So this is what we are going to have as variables. So anything in the form of alphabets, or you have as special characters. So for example, address, it will have alphabets and special characters, right? So you will have also a comma, also a hyphen and everything inside your address. You'll also have a pin code, which is a number inside your address. So address is a field that you can take it as alphabets, numbers, and special characters, right? So any type of data that you're going to have with numbers, alphabets, and special characters, we are going to call it as a string variable. Okay. Always string variable is going to be held inside a double quotes. Okay. So whenever you're going to have a string variable, you're going to have double quotes, and you're going to have the information transferred inside the box called the string box. Okay. So next we have something like integer. So whenever you are dealing with numbers, okay, so any kind of numbers that you're going to have inside your data as a number format, then you're going to go with integers. So what is the difference between a string and an integer? You are able to store information as numbers here also. You're able to store information as numbers here also. The only difference is, usually in the format of numbers, when we are going to perform arithmetic operations, right? Any kind of equations, any kind of comparisons, any kind of arithmetic operations, you will be able to perform with the integer operation. Okay, so when you have it as plain integer field, when you store a data as plain integer field, then you would be able to perform the number calculations. Like you can take the number plus 1, number plus whatever is your information. So those kind of arithmetic operations you will be able to perform. Greater than, lesser than, all those kind of information you will be able to perform. But here directly you won't be able to perform. This is just an information. Okay. Only you can equate it to something and you can perform operations. We'll see that one by one so that you will be able to understand. Right. So that is the only difference between if you store a number, as an integer, or if you store a number as a string. Okay. So next is your Boolean. Boolean is nothing but whenever you are going to make choices, when you want to make decisions, these are flags which will be having true or false. So the default option will be true or false. So when you want to make condition checking, whether this particular condition, so you define a variable with an option of whether it is a true or a false, and you can use that particular flag as a flag to check your decisions, right? So those type of operations you can have it as Boolean. Similarly, you're going to have something called a date time. A date time is nothing but this format that it will follow without the double quotes. So similar to an integer, you have something called a date time, which will also follow the same kind of operation, but without a double quotes. Here you can additionally store time, different formats, right? So you can have the date first, the month, and then the year, or it could be the year, month, and the date. So you could be having in a different format. That comes with a date time format. Okay, that comes with a date time format. And then we have all these things. So what is the difference between a string storing in the date format and a date following in a date format? Again, date has a certain set of functions. Like if you want to put if you want to convert from one format to another, like you want to display it in the month, year, and then the date format, then you will be able to convert that very easily using a date time function. But here the conversion won't be possible. Okay, so that is why you have to choose it wisely. As a developer, when we are going to do, if you're not doing any kind of operation, then you store it as a string variable. Okay, you're not doing any kind of comparisons or anything. You just have plain data, and you are just not touching that particular field where you're having your employee date of joining. Then you're not at all bothered. You can simply have it as string, because string manipulation is going to be very easy. Okay, so we can directly store it as string, and we can go and use it inside the program. But if you're going to perform any other operations, then the wisest option that is available is use it as integer for numbers, because integer will allow you to do the arithmetic operations, and or you can have it as a date time, right? So those information you can store it as date time, so that you can perform any date kind of operations, right? And then we have something called an array. So what is an array? Array is nothing but, now we were talking about fridge, washing machine, and a laptop, right? Now suppose I have 5 fridges. Okay, so 5 fridges, if I want to transport it somewhere, or if I'm buying somewhere, so the one option is you can store into 5 different boxes. Or what you can do is you can put 5 fridges inside one big box, right? So if you put it inside one big box, it is going to have the same product inside, but many in number, right? So the same thing is going to be array. You go to a library. When you go to a library, you're going to have your librarian. You take 5 books. Your librarian is going to write, okay, under my name, there will be 5 books that will be written, right? So this is what we call it as an array, more than one data of the same type. So if you can if you can put it as the book names, then it will come, then it will be called as string, array of string, right? Because it is name of books, right? If you're going to have employee ID stored, then you can put it as array of integers. So the same kind of data, but multiple values of the same data, right? So that only we call it as an array. So array comes under the concept of, in .NET, we have a concept called collections object. So arrays comes under the concept of collections, which means collections is nothing but a group of data or more than one data, right? So that comes under the concept of collections. So similar to array, we have something called a list. A list is going to be the same kind of information. So you can store an array of string where it is going to be enclosed inside a double quotes, or if you could have it as array of numbers or array of integers, where you can have plain numbers separated by commas, or you could have array of date time, array of boolean, anything you can have. Okay, but here the list is also going to be the same thing. It is also going to have the same format, but the difference between a list and an array is that array is going to be fixed length. Okay, which means if you're storing 9 information, you will be able to store only 9 information always. You cannot delete or add more information. So the fixed length remains the same. Okay, I mean it is fixed length, and then you won't be able to modify an array. So these kind of situations gets overcome with a list. Okay, the list is indefinite in number. Okay, so you will have the list of string, list of integers, list of boolean. So you can have the same thing, but again, you can modify. If I want to remove 3 and if I want to put something else, I can go and put that something else inside this particular list. In an array, you won't be able to do that. I mean, more or less, you won't be able to add or delete more information, right? So those kind of information gets overcome by a list. So when can we use an array? Array usually will be used whenever you're dealing with information, like you want to store names, you want to store numbers, you want to store date time. So those kind of information, arrays can be used. Okay, list is going to be used whenever you're going to have, like, you do not know what kind of, or what is the number of data that you will be receiving. So similarly, you can have array of numbers, array of names, array of employee IDs. You can use it like that. Also, you can extend the list to, if you're doing something on your computer where you're doing file archival, right? So you have a physical 10 Excel sheets in your folder, in your file folder in your computer. So you want to process through all the 10 information. Today it is 10, tomorrow it could be 12, day after tomorrow it could be 13. So you do not know the number of the files. So those kind of situations, what we use the list to even store the Excel sheets. So it could be a list of mail messages, a list of file folders, a list of different data, a list of dictionaries. So all those things are are available with the list. We are going to see examples of each type, so you will be having a better understanding. Okay, so array is going to be something, the same type of information, but multiple values of the same information. Similar to an array, we have a list. List is going to be the same thing as that of an array, but it is going to be more advantages in terms of you will be able to modify the information inside the list. You will be able to process the information inside the list. Okay, it is indefinite in length. Okay, so that is a difference. We have another concept inside collections object, which is called dictionary. Okay, so dictionary is similar to an English dictionary that we have. Whenever you want to store pairs of value. Okay, so if you have apple is a fruit, right? So that will be the information and its meaning. That will be in the English book dictionary. So similar to that will be the information that will be stored inside the .NET dictionary also. I mean the UiPath variables dictionary also. So all these, the three information that you have, array, list, and dictionary, will be under collections object. Okay, so we'll see dictionary also separately, so you'll have a better understanding, right? So these are the collections objects that we have, right? So we were trying to store individual string information, okay, individual name, individual numbers, individual true or false, and then an individual date time, and then of the same type you are storing multiple values. So if you're having names, then you will be storing only names. You cannot bring employee ID inside. So these things are available. Now suppose you have different kind of data. Okay, in one field you have a date, in one field you have a name, in one field you have a employee ID. So how will you handle that kind of a data, right? So for that we have a concept called data table. Okay, so data table is a concept where you're going to have more information that you need to pass through inside your program. A data table, as it says, a data in a table format. Okay, so that is what is data. So more than one information, or more than different kind of information that you have. Anything that is bigger pieces of data or bigger chunks of data in a structured format. Okay, so what is that structured format? Table means it's a structured format, right? So anything, any data in a structured format, then you can use the concept of, or you can put it inside a box called data table. Okay, so this data table, what it will do is, it is going to have the concept of rows and rows and columns. Okay, so you are going to have rows and columns. Here you could be having the employee name, here you could be having the employee ID, the date of joining, the appraisal, whatever is your status, the current salary, all those things could be. So you're having different kinds of information. Here it is having string information, your employee ID is an integer information. So you have still different kinds of information, but separated by rows and columns, right? This is nothing but a table structure that you would take. So where and all this table structure will be used? Excel sheets, right? Or any kind of table data that you have in a Word document or in a web page. Okay, any kind of table document, table information. So where and where you have a structured grid kind of an information, more than one data separated into two-dimensional, which is rows and columns, then you're going to store that particular kind of information all together, because there is no use of separating the information, right? So you're going to store all the information together as one big piece of data and put it inside a box called data table. So which means when you're handling Excel sheets, you will be just taking the entire data of an Excel sheet and you will be putting inside a data table. Okay, if you're taking a web page table, then again take the entire data and put it inside a data table. So from there, it is going to be easier for you to process the information, right? So this is what we have it as a data table. So the previous thing was everything was one dimensional. You were just saving one data. And then this was also one dimensional with the same kind of data. But a data table is going to be different with two-dimensional, specified into rows and columns, right? So these were the information that we saw. So this is what we have. Okay, so this is how your information is represented inside UiPath. Okay, now let's consider some examples. Okay, so how will you store your information in your UiPath? When you're going to create it in this format only. So you will be having a variable name, then you will be having a variable type, then you will be having the scope, and then a default, okay, which is a default value, right? So if I'm going to store a single data, okay, say I'm going to store username, right? So what I will do is I will create it as a name of the box. Okay. And it could be in the form of, I'm going to store single data. So when I store single data, I will be putting the variable, because it's alphabet, I'm going to put it as string. So here you will be allowed to choose between what is the kind of variable that you have. There will be a drop down where you will be allowed to choose. The scope will cover later, default information will cover later. Okay. Or the default information is, right now we are storing Rajesh, right? So the default information is Rajesh. So what is the default data that you're going to put inside this particular box? We also have something called a str employee ID. Okay, this is also in the string. This is the name of the box that you're giving. Usually we give it the prefix of whatever is the type. You can give it with any format that you want. Okay, so here also I'm going to give, it is going to be 1001. This is my employee ID. Then I'm going to store okay. So I have a str username. I have an employee ID in the string format, hence it is given with the double quotes. I also have an employee ID, a similar kind of thing without double quotes, right? So let me consider another option. So I'm going to also say Amazon username. Okay. So Amazon username is nothing but so I have the username as either email or mobile phone number. Okay. So I'm allowed to enter either my email ID or my mobile number, right? So let me, the ideal way that you could say is, okay, it can be numbers or it can be special characters, which will be at the rate symbol, or it could be alphabets. So the ideal way of storing it is as a string variable only, right? So you won't be able to store it as an integer variable, because there is a chance that you could also receive an email ID. So here I'm going to say it is going to be this number. Okay. Now you have this kind of a data. Now, how will you make certain operations? Okay. So here, this is the kind of data that you're going to store inside your particular information, so that when your program starts or when your UiPath actually starts, then you're going to talk about the same information, and you're going to talk about you're going to first load these information inside the boxes, and then you're going to use it. Now there is a requirement where I want to take the employee ID and I want to perform an arithmetic operation. So basically, I need to perform an arithmetic operation on the str employee ID. Okay. So here in that case, I want to perform str employee ID is greater than 2000. Okay. Now here, which is basically this particular operation. So it will take this 1001, whatever 2000 is an empty value that I'm giving. I want to compare. So it will be comparing like this, right? So what will happen? This is with double quotes. This is in the plain integer format. So what will happen? It will result in an error. Okay. So which means it is unable to compare a string information with with an integer information. Or if I give the same information like this, so which means it is trying to compare this with this. Okay. Here also there will be a conversion error, because both the strings you cannot have a greater than, you can only have it as an equal to operation can be performed. A greater than, lesser than can be performed only on numbers. Okay. So at this place, it will give you an error. Okay. So at this place, it will say there is an error. So you won't be able to perform. So scenarios like this. So similarly, if you want to convert something from an integer and you want to perform an operation as a string, then you won't be able to perform, because it will throw an error. So in these kind of scenarios, what you're going to do is you're going to use the concept of variable conversions. So the variable conversions is nothing but, right? So we have the concept of variable conversions. So whenever you want, you cannot perform this operation at all. So what we'll do is we'll use a concept of variable conversions. So here, if you need to perform an arithmetic operation, then we need to convert the string to an integer format. Okay, if you do not make this particular format conversion, you won't be able to take from this step, you won't be able to proceed to the next step at all. Your program will just stop with the error. So what we do is we do variable conversions just for that particular box. So in your workflow, you have 10 boxes, and in the 10th box or in the 8th box, you're doing this particular thing. At the 8th box itself, you'll get an error and it will come out of your execution, right? So in those scenarios, what you're going to do is at the 8th box, I will still hold the data as string, but I will be doing the conversion only at the 8th box, and I will take the information and store it into a different box, right? So in the 9th box again, it will be again taking it as string information only. So wherever required only, you're going to go ahead and convert it as a proper, whatever is the other type of variable that you want. Okay, so those kind of scenarios, we are going to use variable conversions. So when I say variable conversions, the same information that I will be taking, but I'm going to give a variable conversion here with the prefix of cint. Okay, so you have a cint followed by the variable name. Okay, what happens is we are going to do a variable conversion. So this point, we are going to give a prefix of cint. Okay, so when you give a prefix of cint, so here also it will get converted into cint. So here we are going to have another information called, now this will get converted into an integer format. So this particular entire information will be coming as, the double quotes will be removed. Okay, so this is what we have it as the, so here at this point, you won't be receiving an error. So these kind of conversions is what we do. So similarly, when you want to convert something from an integer to a string, say an integer or a string to a date. Okay, so you have something called a date of joining. So here we have something called a date of joining. So it is str doj. So you give it in the string format and you give the information as 29 Feb 2021. Okay, so now when you want to do any kind of operation, so if you want to convert this, you're going to convert it as cdate of whatever is your variable name. So you give your str date of joining. If you want to put an equal to and you want to compare whatever, okay, you want to put an equal to or you want to compare if you're checking if the date of joining is 30 Jan. Okay, so what will happen now, this will get converted into this type of format. Right, so whenever you're going to have any kind of string to a date conversion, so you're going to use like this. So similarly, anything in the format of, you're storing something as an integer. Okay, so you're storing an employee ID. So here you stored the employee ID, right? So this particular information, you want to perform an arithmetic operation. So you want to perform the similar kind of operation like greater than 2000. Sorry. Okay, so if you see the difference, I'm having this information. I was performing without the double quotes. Okay, so there you could get the error. I'm performing with the double quotes. So here also you will get the error because this is integer without double quotes and here with double quotes. So obviously you will be receiving an error. So whenever you want to convert an integer or a date time to a string variable, you're going to call it as variable name or say int dot string. So here what will happen, automatically this will get converted into, so whatever was your information that you had. So this was 1002 equal to you were comparing into 2000, right? So whatever information that it will be having, it will get resulted into in the double quotes format. So you give a suffix of dot toString. So obviously it will get converted into this particular format. Okay. So anywhere where you want to do only for that, suppose you are having the entire project, you are going to use it as a string information only, it's fine. You can still go ahead and use it. But at one point, if you want to do the comparison, there you cannot go and introduce a new variable name, right? So only at that place we do the conversions, and you can go ahead and continue with your process flow as such. Okay, so for those things only we have a variable conversions coming into the picture. Now this is the format that you have. Wherever you are necessarily you want to create, then you can go ahead only at that particular activity, you can go and convert that particular string variable. I mean, convert that particular variable type. So a string to an integer, you're going to give a prefix of cint. A string to a date, you're going to give a prefix of cdate. Anything to a string format, you're going to give a suffix of dot toString. Okay, so this is the general practice that we do as a developer. But what happens is UiPath has also, suppose you do not know what kind of data you're going to get it. Say suppose you have an Excel sheet data. In an Excel sheet, the date of joining, you do not know whether it will come as a date field, or you do not know whether it will come as a string field. Okay, so when you do not know as a developer, because we rely on the data that comes from the business, so with the safer thing, I cannot just go ahead and I cannot code the program using just the string format or with the date time format. Okay, so when I do not know the kind of information, so if I do not know what is a parent kind of information, I won't be able to do the variable conversions, right? So at those kind of scenarios, UiPath has given an explicit variable type called the generic value. Okay, so these are called the proprietary variable, which is not there in any other programming language. Okay, so what are the proprietary variables? So the proprietary variables are nothing but the variables that only belong to UiPath. So what does this variable actually do? So the first variable that we talk about is called the generic value. So the generic value variable is going to be a variable that will do automatic conversions from one format to another format. Okay, so suppose we do not know what kind of information we are going to receive, or what kind of data that will come, or what is the format of the data that will come, then we can simply use the generic value format, and you can go ahead and store any kind of information inside it. So what will happen? So here I'm going to say date of joining is going to be a generic value. So at runtime, you could store it as in a string format, or you could store it as in a, so at runtime, what will happen is this will be doing the automatic conversions. So if you create something like this, okay, and when you want to do an arithmetic operation, like you want to find the greater than of a date time, it will automatically convert to a date time format from the string. This is a string format, right? So you're storing the string format inside a generic value. So what happens is it will automatically convert from this format. It will automatically convert from this format to the format. You need not give a prefix of cdate. It will automatically do the conversions. So that is what a generic value will be doing. So here what it will do, a generic value will be like, if you're going to have the same thing, so the automatic conversions happen. You need not give a prefix at all. Automatically, it will take a conversion, and automatically it will recognize that it is in the date time format, and it will convert it into the necessary format. So similarly will be the value for a string to a date, or an integer to a string. So any format it will automatically do. So that is what a generic value will be doing. A generic value is an ideal variable when you do not know what kind of data you're going to receive. That time you can store it as a generic value. Another information that we have is a queue item. A queue item is an explicit information that we have it inside with the UiPath. Okay. Whenever we are going to, there's a concept called queues in the orchestrator. Whenever you want to store orchestrator queue information, then you're going to use the variable type called queue item. We'll cover this later. Okay. So what is a generic variable? So basically you have string, you have integer, you have boolean, date time, and under the collections you have array, list, dictionary, data table, And then we have explicit variables for UiPath, which is going to be the proprietary variables, which is the generic value and the Q item. Generic value avoids variable conversion. So it does the automatic variable conversion all by itself. Okay. And Q item is going to be something that is going to be part of your orchestrator queues. So generic value variable is a type of a variable that can store any kind of data, including text, numbers, dates, arrays. So any kind of data it can store. Okay. So it does automatic conversions from one variable type to another in order to perform certain actions. Okay. However, there is a information that you need to see. So this is how your variables of a generic value will be available. So you see result also is given as generic variable. Int is your first information. This is also generic, but without a double quotes they are giving. So it is an integer information. They are storing it as a generic value. Str is another variable name. Again, they are storing it as a generic. These are the box names. Okay. So generic value, and they are storing it in the format of string. Okay. So whenever you are going to perform the first information plus the second information, which means it should be performing addition, right? So what it will do is it will take the base information. The base information is the first information. So that is in the format called integer. So whenever you do the base information as integer and you do a plus operation, it will do 10 plus 20 is equal to 30. So it will take the base information and it will give you in that corresponding format. Okay. So if it is an integer and you're performing integer plus a string, it will just add the information and it will give you in the integer format. Whatever is the first information, the same format you'll get it. Okay. That is your generic value. Similarly, if I'm going to perform the vice versa of it, the string information first and then your integer information, the string, it will take the base value. The first information is a string content, so which is 20. 20 cannot be added with 10 because it is a string information. So what it will do, plus means in UiPath it is concatenation. Okay. So what it will do, it will concatenate and it will give you a result of 20, 10. Okay. So whenever you are using a generic value, precisely use it in the right way. If you are going to perform an arithmetic operation, put your integer information first. Okay. You can store even datetime information inside it. So if you put a datetime information and you're trying to find, you will understand it slowly as we get into the examples. Try finding the difference between if I store the information as string, what is going to happen? If I store the information as generic value, what will be happening? Okay. So based on the first information, the generic value will be taking that first information as the base, and only on that it will be performing the next set of information. So if you have this as a string information stored in a generic value, then it will perform a string operation, where plus is going to be a concatenation string operation. If you're putting an integer number information inside the base information as a first information, then it will be performing addition operation, the arithmetic operation. Okay. So this is your generic value information. So once you understand how we are going to handle the data inside your project, next we are going to get into the programming of creating your workflow, right? So your workflow is going to be, or your process automation is going to use these particular variables for holding the data. So at every point when you do data manipulation or holding the data, then at every point you're going to go ahead and continue doing your data holding. So which means you need to go ahead and create your variables and you need to hold it. If you don't hold it, your variable will disappear, or it will be just losing away from the memory of your computer or the program memory, right? So let me go ahead and create a new process. Let's start with our understanding of let's start with the understanding of what actually we are going to do with these variables. Okay. So whenever we are going to have variables, we are going to go and start with our process flow. So in our process flow, what happens? You might be making decisions, you might be making arithmetic operations, you might be doing calculations, right? So you might be doing a different set of activity based on your project requirement. You might be doing iterations, right? You want to do the same thing. So you might be doing iterations. So let's understand individually what do we do so that we can go ahead and create process automations. Okay. So what we'll do is we need to understand a concept called control flow. Okay. A control flow is nothing but the activities or the syntaxes that is going to control the flow of your process execution. or your project execution. This is what we call it as a control flow. Okay, so a control flow is nothing but whenever you want to make decisions, whenever you want to make equations, or whenever you want to make some kind of looping logic. So all these things are going to control your flow of execution, which means there is, whenever you make decisions, your flow is going to be either in one way or the other direction, right? So these are all the operations that will be controlling your flow of execution. This is what we call it as control flow activities or the control flow operations that is available inside UiPath. So what are the control flow activities? We have a couple of control flow activities that is available. Right? So we have a couple of control flow activities that is available. The first activity that we are going to talk about is assign and multi-assign. Okay. So what does it actually do? It is going to perform operations like something is equal to something. Whenever you want to hold data or whenever you want to create an equation, say suppose you want to make as A is equal to B plus C, or you want to say A is equal to A plus 1. Okay, so which means you're going to say A is a variable name, B is a variable name, C is a variable name. Okay, so similarly, you want to perform an operation like result is equal to number 1 plus number 2. So this is an assign statement that we use. Okay, so you're assigning something to something. So whenever you want to perform operations like you want to hold the data. So here in the result, there was no information. When you're performing this particular information as number 1 plus number 2, say this particular information is going to be 10 plus 20. So obviously the result which was 0 before at this particular operation will be modified into 30. So 30 needs to be held inside the variable called result. Okay, so this is what we do inside an assign. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead. I'm opening the main workflow. So what I'll do, the first, whatever you do, the first step is going to be you either need to drag a sequence or you need to drag a flow chart. Okay, that will be your first step. Or if not, I'm going to go ahead and drag an assign statement directly. This is my first box, means automatically when I drag in, automatically a sequence will be created. Okay, so as a part of this, you always make sure the first step is going to be you either drag a flow chart or a sequence. Sequence is going to be more linear, right? So if your process is going to be very simple, then go ahead and you can create it automatically. It will get created as a sequence automatically. But every time when we are making certain process flows, we might be having a lot of decision making and everything. So as a best practice, me personally, I always drag a flow chart. So I will drag a flow chart and the first operation. So every time you can go and modify the name of your activities also. So if you have a flow chart, as a best practice, you can go and modify the name. So you can put it as flowchart underscore first demo or flowchart underscore your project name, whatever you want to modify. Okay, so we give a short annotation or you give a short information as to what is that particular information is about or that activity is about. So you can be, that's a best practice that we have, right? So you have a flowchart and I'm going to create an assign statement. So here what I'm going to do is, this is my assign. I am manually, I can create an arrow, or I can simply right click and I will say set a start node, means the start will get connected to this particular thing. Okay, so you can use any of the options or you can simply move it here and there so it will get highlighted. So in case you're not having this, I'm just moving it here. So if I move it, see, until I reach a particular point, I get this particular thing highlighted. Here also I get this particular thing highlighted. Here also I get this particular thing highlighted. So you can also drop it in a way that it gets highlighted and automatically a connector gets created. So this is your first information. Okay. So now here what I'm going to do is I'm going to create 3 boxes. Okay. Where should I go and create? I'm going to create the boxes inside an information called the variable panel. So the variable panel, I'm going to do the number calculation. Okay. So I'm going to create 3 boxes here. So one is going to be the number 1. So it is going to store the first number, right? So here I can choose between what is the information that I have. So I have Boolean, integer, string, data table, array, right? the other extra things, data table and everything, you can go for browse for types and you can go ahead and choose it. So now this is going to be integer, right? So here what I'm going to do, I'm going to put it as number 1 is going to be storing. Say I'm going to store 100. Okay. So you can put this 100 here or you can put it 100 here. Anything is going to be the same. Just for the demo purpose, I'm doing it here. So another assign statement, and I'm going to store. Let me store the second number as number 2. I'm going to store it as integer. And here itself, I'm going to store 200. Okay. So here I'm going to perform arithmetic operations. So which means if I've created here, I need not go and assign it here again. If you want, you can do it, but you need not do that because you have already assigned it here, right? And then we are going to create another variable called result. So this box will be created to hold the information of the summation of both the things. So this also, it is going to be performing arithmetic operation. So this is the result. I do not know what is the result, right? So I need to perform what is number 1 and number 2. So here what I will do is, I will be going ahead and creating it as result. Result is equal to number 1. So there is something called an IntelliSense. So this IntelliSense gives you all the list of variables that is available. Okay. So number 1 plus control space. If you do, the IntelliSense will appear. So number 2. Right. So automatically there was this I symbol and automatically it disappeared, saying that your result will now be holding the summation of number 1 and number 2. So you have the 3 information held inside your particular program. So at the start of the thing, the number 1 was actually 0 at the start of your program execution. So the start of your program execution is initialization of your variables. Okay. So usually it will start from the variable panel. So usually you create space for your variables and store the data, and then we get into the actual process flow. Okay. So initialization of your particular project. So this particular project means when you're starting, when you go and click on run, what will happen? First, a space will be created for these 3 variables. Okay. Number 1 with 0 data, number 2 with 200 as the data, result with 0 data. Okay. Then all the 3 information is now there. Your program starts. When it starts, it is going to go inside number 1. Before it was number 1 was equal to 0. Now automatically 100 will be held inside number 1 as the variable name. Then number 2 is already 200, which is held inside your program. Now result, which was 0, will be performing this particular operation, and it will be having it as 200 plus 100 will be actually equal to 300. So 300 will be held. So when your program completes, result number 1 and number 2 will be occupying a different space in the memory based on the data that you're holding it. Okay. So which means you are already creating a space, then you're going an execution, you clear out the space, which means no more. The moment the program executes and ends the execution, the values will again go back to whatever was the previous value. Here it was 0 means it will go back to 0. Here it was 0 means it will go back to 0. So every time you start a program or you run a program execution, every time the project initiation will happen, and then the project execution, and then the project end. Okay, which is freeing out your spaces, right? So usually this is what will be happening. Now here, this is your assign statement. So similarly, you have something called a multi-assign. A multi-assign is nothing but, okay, the same information, instead of dragging and dropping 3 boxes. So here I can put it as number 1 is equal to 100 inside one same box. You can add and you can put it as result is equal to num1 plus num2. The same operation, but you're just going and doing it inside one box. So instead of it is just I'm saying for the developer. So instead of creating 2 drag and drops of 2 or 3 boxes, you can simply put it inside one multiple assign and you can go ahead. Okay. Now, so now you're performing this particular operation. When you perform this particular operation, you need to see what is the value of result, right? So whenever you want to perform a print message, you want to display a certain message. So you use you use a box called message box. Okay. So this will actually print the information in your screen. So what I need to print, I need to display what is the value of result only, right? So I will simply go and put it as print, result. Okay. So now what will happen? It will just be performing the operations. and it will be printing the result for me. So let me execute. Okay, look at my screen at this particular point. Okay, there will be another window that will be opening, right? I'm doing a control F5 or a run for run. So if you see, there is a new window that has opened. Okay, one is this particular pop-up. Okay, another window is your actual robot. Okay, so you might have installed the studio only, but when you execute anything in your studio, automatically your robot will be executing. So this is your robot. If I click on it, nothing will open. Okay, this is an invisible window, right? You won't be able to see a window or a display in anything. So that is the backend robot that is running along to execute your program. So now your message box is displayed as 300. Okay, so this is your assign statement. So you have your assign information. So what I'll do is, instead of creating it as separate information, I'm going to create it as a sequence so that we know. I'm giving a name. I'm just copying all this, Control X, and paste it inside, right? Always it interchanges the position. So this is how it was. So now I have a sequence for assign. So if I want the first, so the moment I read the name itself, I know it is performing operations related to an assign statement. Okay. Then we have another control flow operation, which is the delay. A delay is, it makes your program to pause for some time. So if you use delay, then you're going to have something called, your program will wait. Right? So your program will wait for hours, sorry, hours, minutes, and seconds. So if you give it for 10 seconds, so your program will wait for 10 seconds and then only execute the next step. So in between this and this, I give a delay. So the first operation will be a delay, wait for 10 seconds, and then only it will be executing. That is a use. So when you can use a delay, whenever you are performing some operations and you want a program to wait or do halt, or you're doing a manual check, your robot is doing, and you want to side by side do a manual check, right? So at that time, you can ask the robot to wait for that 30 minutes or something, and then you can go ahead and do your continue with your operation. So you give a delay of 30 minutes, so your program will still wait for you to complete. And after 30 minutes, it will start the execution. Okay, so you can use a delay like that, or whenever you want to enter username, password. So the username will automatically be entered by the robot, but the password the user have to enter. So you give a delay of 10 seconds so that you give time for the user to enter the password. Then from there, the robot will take the control. Those kind of operations, you can have a delay. Okay, so, right. So a delay is that. Then we are going to get into the next information. So then we are going to talk about condition statements. So conditional statements are nothing but whenever you want to make condition checking, decision making. So you have if. If is going to be if, then else. Right? So in other programming languages, you need to write this particular code. But here it is going to be already written for you. So here, if you type as if, you'll automatically get that. So before that, let me put a sequence. So we are doing everything into one project, right? So we'll just create separate sequence for everything so that we will not lose control of, right? Here I'm going to just go ahead and search for if. Right? So here what I'm going to do is I'm just going to compare what is number 2. Since we already have number 2, okay, I'm going to go ahead and compare number 2. We were talking about something called a scope. I never mentioned what was scope. A scope is nothing but where the variable needs to be created. Where does it, or what is the usage? What is the extent of usage that we are going to do with the variable? For suppose, am I going to use this variable throughout the program? Okay, or am I going to use it only inside a particular sequence in a particular block? For example, login related stuff, you might be using it only for the logging in, right? After that, you might be not requiring the login username and password, right? So those kind of scenarios, when you want a certain variable to be available throughout the program, so you give your scope as flowchart, which means throughout your execution, the information will be available. Here actually result is going to be specific only to assign sequence. So I can simply go ahead and change it to assign. So automatically the assign will be available only when I click on this. Okay, so which means the variable will be created and it will be active and holding the data only inside this. Suppose if I want to use result outside, it won't be available. Okay, this is better utilization of memory. That is why we have a scope created. Okay, so that if you have 100 variables, you need not hold space for all the 100 variables. That is not the right information that we need to do. So you go ahead, create your scope or define your scope so that where am I going to use this particular variable. So if I'm going to use it only inside here, I create that particular thing and I'll change to the scope as that particular information. Okay, so if you want to use it throughout the thing, then you go ahead and create it only as that particular whatever is your sequence. So you give your information as that particular sequence. Yeah, that is your scope, right? So we were talking about a if statement. So here an if statement, what is going to do, some wherever I want to make condition checking. Okay, so when I want to make condition checking, like if number 2 is greater than 300 or not. Number 2 is actually 200. If I want to make a condition check, if number 2 is greater than equal to 300. If it is true, then it will come to this particular block. If it is false, it will go into this particular block. So what will happen? What is inside number 2? Number 2 is actually having 200. So is 200 greater than or equal to 300? No. So it will go to the false section or the else section, right? So here also I'm going to give a message box. Generally, we write a piece of coding here, right? So we generally, instead of a message box, there will be a certain set of operations that you will be doing, right? So instead of that, for demo purposes, I'm just putting a message box. So here I'm going to put a message box which will say, so this is going to be number 2 is greater than 300. So this is true section. So the same thing, if it comes this side, it is going to be a false. Right, so it will take number 2 was actually 200 greater than equal to 300. No, so it will come here. So if I need to execute this, I'm going to connect this to this. So I'm going to do it as right click, set a start node. Okay, which means only this part of your program will be executed. This will just be hanging inside. There is no memory leakage or there's no memory usage or anything. This will never be executed. Okay, whichever is connected via the connectors, only that boxes will be executing. So here, if I go ahead and execute the same thing, Control F5 or run. Number 2 is less than. So it goes to the else section, right? So these kind of operations, whenever you want to make, like in an if statement, you want to consider any kind of checks. If date of joining greater than this particular date, or if the employee count is equal to or greater than 10, or if the data table, the entire data table, the content of the data table is more than 10 rows. So all those kind of operation, you will be able to do it with the if. Okay, so the if statement will allow you to do condition operations or condition checking. So similar to an if, we also have something called a flow decision. So what is a flow decision? A flow decision is going to be just the same as if, but it is going to be more presentable visually. Okay, so it is also the same as if, but it can be used only inside a flow chart. Can be accommodated only inside a flowchart. If can be accommodated inside both flowchart as well as a sequence. Okay, whenever you have the word called flow, you are going to be accommodating only inside a flowchart. So what does it do? It does the same operation of that of a if statement, but actually it does it more presentably. Okay. Set a start node. So only this particular activity will be done. So this is similar to your if statement. Okay. So this if statement will be like whatever is your condition that you gave. So here I say check number 2 is greater than equal to 300, right? So here also I'm going to give the same thing. The condition you need to go and give it here. So the right click on the click on the 3 dots, you will get an expression editor getting opening. So this is going to be the same thing. Number 2 is greater than equal to 300. So if it is true, it will go to this side. If it is false, it will go to this side. So the same operation, I'm copying this. So actually, we will be writing more pieces of information, right? We will be actually having more dabbas inside. So this is going to be more presentable, though it does the same operation. But if you see visually, you will be viewing that, okay, your code is going in two different directions. So there is a decision making that we do it here. So here you won't be able to visually put it here. So here it will be like the same box, but two different directions. Visually, you cannot relate it more easily. So here the look itself, it will say visually we are going into two different directions. If your login succeeded, then you will be continuing with the set of operation. If your login did not succeed, then you will say stop here and retry. You have to retry your username password. So you will be doing that set of operations. So here it will be continuing with whatever navigations you will be doing. That is called a flow decision. So here the flow decision also will be doing the same thing. Number 2 is actually 200. It will go to the false section. Number 2 is less than 300. So it is going to the false section. So this is your flow decision. Okay, and flow decision can be used only inside the flow chart, right? Right. So we had the assign, delay, and the conditional statements. Then we have, suppose if you need to do looping operations. So whenever you want to do looping kind of operations or iterations, you want to perform the same operation again and again. Sorry. Whenever you want to perform looping or iterations on the same operation again and again. So if you're doing the employee, if you're doing an appraisal calculation for group of employees, so which means you're doing appraisal calculation is your common step, and you're doing the same step for different employees, right? For 10 people if you're doing. So which means the same appraisal calculation need to be repeated 10 times, right? So these kind of operations, we call it as an iteration, or when we call it as a looping operation. Okay. So your program will definitely have looping operations whenever you're going to do data processing kind of activities. For sure, like if you want to process Excel data, if you want to process a web page data. So those kind of scenarios, you will be for sure touching base with your looping or iteration activities. So what are the looping activities? So we have the first looping activities for each row in data table. Okay, so which means you have a concept called data table. The data table is going to be having more than one data, right? So we can do a looping only when it has got more than one data, right? So we can do a looping inside. You cannot do a looping for a string information, right? Because only one data is there. So only once it will be done. But whenever you have an array, you will be able to do looping because it has got more data. So whenever you have got more data, then you can do a looping logic. Okay. So which means where and all more data will be stored? Arrays, list, dictionary, data table. So here and all you can do a looping logic. Okay. So to perform that looping logic, we have the first information called a for each row inside a data table. So whenever you have a data table data, say suppose you have 10 employees data and you want to perform a looping. So which means if you're doing an appraisal calculation, so here in the 7th column, you have all the information and you're doing the appraisal calculation, or you're doing a increment of 10%. So what you'll do, this is your salary field. You will just do 10% of the salary field. So here for the first employee, it will do, right? Then you will loop through. So the same operation will be done for the second employee, the third employee, the fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and it will do until the 10th. So this is a looping logic, which means for all data inside the data table. That is what a for each row actually says. A for each row inside data table means for each row of information inside the data table. For each row in the sense for each employee, right? So the first row will have employee one's data. The second row will have employee two's data. So for each row inside the data table means it will automatically do the looping logic for all the data inside the data table. Okay, so there is a logic that you will be doing for each row. So you have a data table and a for each row. So we'll do this for each row when we are doing the other kind of automations that we will do as certain examples. So I'm not going to cover for each row now. Okay. So for each row is going to be, you just need to do the certain set of operations and you will be looping the same thing. So here you just give the data table name and you give the looping logic. Appraisal is equal to 10% of the salary. So here for each row, it will do it. So the first employee, it will do. The second, you need not increment the loop. It will automatically do the looping for all the data. That is why it says for each row, which means for each row in your data table, for all the data in your data table. When your data is stored explicitly in a data table, then you're going to use a for each row inside data table. So that is why we call it as data table. Okay. So this is your first operation, first looping logic. The next looping is going to be for each control. Okay, so this is going to be performing only when data is stored in right? So this is explicitly written for data table data handling. This is written for anything else other than the data table. So where do we have multiple data that will be available? It will be available inside, whenever, as we learned, it will be available inside arrays. It will be available inside list. It will be available inside a dictionary. So multiple data is available at these positions, right? So whenever you are going to have multiple data stored other than the data table variable, all those information you are going to store it as for each control. So whenever you want to loop through an array, you're going to use for each control. And you want to loop through the content of a list, then you're going to have a for each control. Right? So other than data table, here also you have more data. So other than the data table, wherever you have more data and you want to loop through that particular data and do some processing, then you're going to use for each control. Explicitly, 90% of the projects will be using for each row when you're using data table concepts, right? When you're doing table data, Excel sheet data, all those places you will be doing for each row in data table. But other than that, when you're explicitly managing array data or the list data, list of file folders, list of mails that you want to do. So all those places you will be doing for each control. The looping logic, we'll see all this one by one as we go inside the example. So you'll have a better understanding. Right? So this one is going to be a for each data table. We are going to do it in the later classes. So here for each control also we'll be doing it, but that is going to come at a later stage. So you won't be able to remember. So for now, I'll be doing a for each control. Okay. So I'm creating another sequence, setting this as start node. So now this gets disappeared, right? What I'll do is I'll just move this towards a different position so that you don't get confused, right? So now this gets connected to this particular sequence. So this is going to be your for each. I'm just double clicking it so it enables me to give me a short annotation, right? So this is going to be a for each. So I double click here. So first I'm going to loop through an array. Okay, the easiest thing that you can remember is I'm going to loop through an array. So which means I need to define my array and I need to define my data inside an array, right? So you can define an array like this. So you can simply go and give it as array books info. Okay, so I'll just do it as array. So I'll just select array of, right? So you have different kinds of options that you have. You can store an array of books, which is string. You can store an array of employee IDs, which is array of integers. So you are allowed to choose. So what is the kind of arrays that you want to choose? So am I going to use a Boolean information like true or false? Am I using an array of Boolean information? Then you can go ahead and put it as array of Boolean. I'm going to actually store the book name. So I'm going to list as array of string. Okay. So array of string here. So it automatically creates a scope for each sequence. Only inside this particular book info will be available. So here you can directly give the data here, or you can use an assign statement and you can give the data. So I'll directly give the data. So I'm going to have a data of 5 books inside my array. Okay. So here always arrays comes inside a curly bracket, a flower bracket. Okay. So you give, I'm going to give array of string. So I'm going to give it as double quotes. Book 2, see, book 3, book 4, and book 5. So this is the content of my array. Okay. So here you might be looping inside the array, means you're going to do take book 1, you're going to do a certain set of operations, then book 2, then certain set of operations. So which means you're going to loop through all the data one by one. So whenever you want to loop through, or you can simply go, if you don't want to assign it here, you can simply go and assign it here, and you can say book info is equal to this particular value. You can do it like that also, just as we did for number. However you want, you can do it. The ideal choice is you leave this empty and you have to run it inside your program. You have to use an assign statement inside your program, because this is called hard coding. Since we are just practicing, we are just going ahead. As we go inside your program, exercises and everything, you'll be understanding what is the best way to handle your data or write it as a default. So here, since I have defined it here, I want to loop through. So here I'm going to loop through using for each control, because it is not data table data. So I'm going to use for each control. So bring this down here. So for each control means for each item inside which thing inside the array. So you give the book info name. Okay, so for each item inside this particular book info, which means item will be book 1. Next time item will be book 2. The next time item will be book 3. The next time item will be book 4 and book 5. So automatically item will get overwritten as the number of loops increase. Okay, so this is your 0th position, the first position, the second position, third position, and the fourth position. Okay, so always item of 0. So you can actually pick it as item of 0 and you can take it and you can do an individual processing. Or if you want to do the same processing again and again, then you can use a for each loop and you want to process the item value, where the item the first time will be book 1, the second time automatically it will be rewritten as your loop gets iterated. Okay, so here you can do any kind of processing. Here suppose you are having employee ID as number as an array of employee IDs, then if you want to do a salary calculation, then you will be going and doing an assign statement and you will be doing a salary calculation. Okay, so here you will be, we'll see that in the examples. Here you will be doing an assign and you will be doing 10% of your salary. So 10% of the salary will be calculated and it will be written on your Excel sheet or it will be written on the web page. So that kind of processing you will be doing, right? So for each item, whatever kind of processing you need to do, you can do the processing here. But for now, I'm just going to display it as a message box. So I'm going to display it as message box. What I'm going to display? I'm going to display only the individual items of the arrays. So here I will be, what is the individual item? Here the individual item is the information that I have. So this has got item means it will first give me book 1. Second time it will give me book 2. Third time it will be, or you can simply, if you want to take item dot, there are so many information that is available. So you can choose this part. Since it is an array, since it is a string information, it is not displaying anything. So for now, we'll just leave that. So basically, if you want to display, if here the processing could be anything. Here in my case, I'm doing a message box, right? So the first time it will be displaying book 1. As you increment, it will be displaying until book 5. And at the end of book 5, it will automatically close the information and end the loop and it will come outside. So for all the data inside the book info, inside the array, it will do this particular operation. Okay, so this is your for each. In the for each, explicitly you have to remember something called a type argument. Okay, type argument is nothing but what type of argument are you passing inside this particular for each, or what type of data are you passing inside the for each. Okay, why this is required? A type argument, why is a type argument required? So type argument is actually required because here we are explicitly processing only data table data. Okay, so here you for sure know that the data is going to come from the data table only. So every time you're going to process only from the data table. So it is explicitly says you're going to process from the data table. So you need, so it by default, the UiPath Studio will know that it is data table data. But here you're processing other than the data table. So it could be arrays, it could be a list data, it could be a dictionary data, it could be any kind of data, right? It could be a list of mail messages, it could be an array of string, it could be an array of numbers. So it will not know what kind of data you're going to pass or what type of argument or the data that you're going to pass. So it will get confused at one point because it is a generalized control, right? It is a generalized activity. So for that, they have an option called a type argument where you explicitly say what type of data you are passing. I am passing kind of string data. So I am passing an array of string. So I will be choosing string information. If I'm passing mail messages, I will be choosing mail message. If I'm passing physical folders, I will be choosing file folders. Okay. So if you're passing employee IDs, which is integer format, you will be choosing integer. So it will work perfectly for this particular cycle, because otherwise it will just confuse, because it is a generic activity written for processing all kind of data. So you need to say, explicitly say what type of data you are passing. In the entire UiPath, in this entire course, you will be learning type argument available in 3 options only. Okay, 3 activities only. The first activity is your for each activity, for each control activity. Okay, so you just have to remember this. When if you don't give the type argument, it will work, but it will not work exactly 100%, right? So your type argument is something where you explicitly go and say for the for each control to say I am passing string data. So you behave in a format that you need to process the string data, right? So this is the information. So if I go and execute this, am I connected to this? Yeah. So if I go and execute this, the looping logic will be going. So it will execute the same information 5 times. Individually, it will go. The entire book info was 5 items. So individually, it is going to display the item. The first time it was book 1. The second time it is book 2. After that, it will end the execution. Okay. So this is your for each control. So whenever you want to process all the data inside the data table, or all the data inside the arrays, or all the data, okay, which is if you have 10 rows, you want to process all the 10 data. So whenever you have the looping, when you want to scan through entire information. The next looping logic that we have is when you want to perform specified set of data processing. Okay, so whenever you want to perform specified set of data processing, so this was basically when you're having all the data that you want to process, loop through all the data. This is going to be for specified set of data. Okay, you need to increment here. Automatically it was incrementing, right? So here you need to increment the loop. So both the content is going to be for specified set of data. Suppose if you have 10 data, and if you want to loop through only the first 5 data, then you will say, I want to loop through only the first 5 data, and you are going to, it's not going to auto increment. You need to increment until it reaches 5. Okay, so that is what you're going to do in a while or a do while loop. So while or a do while loop also will be working in a similar manner. The only difference between a while and a do while is, let me execute and then we'll see. Another sequence I'm going to create for while. You'll see the difference in a while and a do while when we are doing the actual examples. But for now, I am just showing you the basic example. Okay, let me create a while. Okay, so here before this, I'm going to put an assign. And I'm going to create a variable called counter. Okay, counter is a variable I will be creating whenever you want to perform some kind of operations. When you want to, we usually have the concept of counters when you want to increment. Okay, we give because incrementation value also needs to be stored, right? So what happens is we'll give a variable called counter, and we will go ahead and store the incrementation value inside this particular information. You'll use this variable whenever you're dealing with Excel, whenever you're dealing with any kind of other data processing, all those things. We'll see that in detail, but for now, I'll just explain it so you can get the concept, okay? So here I'm going to have a variable called counter, and I'm going to start with 1. Okay, so let me go and create a variable. You can create the variable called counter here, or the shortcut for creating the variable is right click and you can go ahead and say create variable, which is Control K, or you can simply put Control K. Automatically your variable is now created. Okay, so here I want the counter to store only integer information, numbers, so I'm going to changing it to numbers. So it is Control K is the shortcut for creating a variable. So if you need not every time go to the variable panel and create a variable, you can automatically create it from any of the activities. Okay, so you create a counter variable and I'm going to give defaultly give the counter as 1. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to auto increment the counter. Okay, so or I'm going to process only a certain set of data. So here if I give the counter to, say I'm going to give the counter as 10. Okay, so I want to process information from 10 to 5 or 10 to 6. So now what I need to do, I need to every time when it comes inside the loop, I'm going to decrement the counter. So which means I will be putting another assign statement and I'm going to say counter is equal to counter minus 1. You will be doing some, say suppose I'm going to, every time the counter gets automatically coming in, I'm going to put, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do until, okay, let me delete this. So until it reaches 5, okay, I'm going to perform a set of operations only for 10 to 6 data. Okay, the rest 5 to 1, I'm not going to do anything. So whenever I want to do perform a set of operations for a specified set of data, I'm going to use a while loop. So here what I'm going to do is until my counter is greater than 6 or greater than 5. So which means 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10, it is going to perform the operation, right? So what I'm going to perform is I'm just going to perform the operation of displaying. Okay, you might be performing any kind of operation here. You might be performing an arithmetic operation or an appraisal calculation or whatever. But here I'm going to, for the demo, I'm just going to perform the message box where it will actually say what is the counter value. Okay, and I need to, here in the for loop automatically incrementation was going on, right? But in the while loop you need to increment. So the automatic incrementation or the decrementation will never happen. So you need to increment. Here, since my start point of the counter was 10, I'm going to automatically decrement the information. Okay, so I'm going to put an assign and I'm going to automatically decrement. So here counter is equal to counter minus 1. So what will happen? The first time it came as 10, it will go inside. Is counter greater than 5? Yes. So I'm going to do my processing. So here it will display 10. So now it will be, I'm decrementing so that I can loop through. Okay, so here it will be counter is equal to counter minus 1. So now it will be coming to 9. So again it will loop. So counter is greater than 5. Yes, 9 is greater than 5. Again processing. So if you have 1 and if you want to increment also, you can do it. Instead of minus 1, you will be doing a plus 1. Okay. So here what will happen is it will be running 5 times. So the first information was, it will start from 10. It will go to 9, 8, 7, 6, and it should be ending here. Okay. Right. So whenever, so for a while loop, whenever you want to do a specified, so here instead of counter, you will be using, if you want to process between 5th row and the 10th row, you will be saying a row count is equal to 5 between 5 and 10. So it will be processing only the 5 and 10 rows. Okay. We'll see examples so that you will be able to understand. Just remember the concept so that when we get inside the programming, your process automations, we'll be using all these control flows so that you will understand the perfect working of how a while loop will be using. So a while is nothing but whenever you want to perform specified set. So what does a do while actually do then? Do while also will actually do the same thing, right? But if you see there is a difference in the do while, I'm just decrementing the size. Okay. So here what does a do while actually do? A while is going to have the condition first and then the body. So based on this condition, if it is true only, it will be executing. But here the body is first and then only you're having the condition. So even if the condition is not true, once it will execute. Okay, so the same thing I'm going to copy. So I'll copy this. Okay, the same thing, the same information. What happened? Oh, sorry. Need to copy this. Okay, and the same condition. The same thing, but in a reverse format. The body gets executed and then the condition gets checked. So here also I need to bring it back to, so here what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment this. So commenting is Control D, comment out is Control D. The shortcut for commenting is Control D. So I have commented out so that the while loop will not execute. Right? So the same thing it will be doing. But what it will do, it will check the information first. Okay. In my case, I'm going to give the information as 1. Okay. By default, if it is counter is equal to 1, it should not come inside this. In a while loop, it will not come inside. So it will automatically say, no, it is wrong. But what will happen? Whether the condition is satisfied or not, it will execute it once. Okay, so it will execute, it will display the counter as 1, it will go from 1 to 2, and then it will go and check if 2 is greater than 5 or not. Okay, no, it is 2 is not greater than 5, so it will exit out of the loop. So a do while is at least once it will be executing. So 1 still is going inside the loop, then only the condition is checked. So the difference between a while and a do while is the same set of operations it will be doing, but a do while will be using the condition checking only after executing at least once. So which means whenever you want to perform a condition where you want to execute the program or you want to do a processing, whether the condition is checked or not, at that time you're going to go ahead and do this kind of processing. Okay. Okay. So this is your do while. Right? So based on whatever is your condition, whatever is the thing, it is going to perform the same operation. But the only difference is going to be, it is going to perform the operation at least once, while the while loop will perform the operation only when the condition is satisfied. Okay, that is your control flow. So we saw an assign. Assign is going to be whenever you are going to assign something to a variable. The if is going to be whenever you are going to have conditions based on, like when you have a condition checking. Okay, and then we are going to have something called a flow decision, which will be the same as a same as that of your if statement. Then we have the looping logic, which will be a for each row in data table to loop through all the data in the data table, a for each in control to loop through all the data other than the data table. So it is arrays, list, example, etc. That is, and not in data tables. Explicitly, you have two different information. Then you have a while and a do while. A while and a do while is going to be like, it enables you to actually process only part of the data. Any specified data that you are going to process, any specified part of your automation, right? So both the things are going to be the same. The only difference between a do while activity is activities are evaluated only after the body is executed once. So at least once the body will be executed. So here the body will be executed only when the condition is satisfied. Okay. Right? And in addition to that, I missed a break statement. So here, these are the information that you will have with respect to your looping. So only 3 looping logics are available. So you have a for each control, sorry, for each row in data table, a for each control, a while and a do while. Okay. So what is this particular thing information going to do? It is going to loop. So how many ever number of times you iterate, you will be doing. Here automatic incrementation will be happening and it will be doing for all the data. Here no automatic incrementation and it will be doing only for specified set of data. Since you give it a specified set of data, you're going to do a increment on by your own. Okay, we'll see with definite examples so that you will be able to understand where we are using what kind of looping logic. Okay, so here another important information that I left was the break statement. So the break statement is nothing but a statement that will just break the execution and come out of your looping. Okay, so this can be used only inside okay, so this can be used only inside a for each loop. It could be a for each data table or it could be a for each control. So what it will do is if you insert a break statement, so if you insert a particular break statement, right, it will do a similar scenario as that of a do while or a while loop. It will just execute the moment it comes with a break statement, it will just come out of your loop. Okay, so here actually we were doing it 5 times, right? We were doing it for entirely inside the books, inside the book info array, we were doing it 5 times. But here if you see, I have given a break statement, it will automatically come out of the loop after the first time itself. Book 1, there is a break and it has come out. So a for each break statement can be used only inside a for each. When it can be used, we already have a while and a do while doing the same thing. Why do we need a break statement? Explicitly, if you want to make certain condition checking. In real time, we might be having scenarios where you will be able to achieve it using only a for each statement. And you want to loop through only once and you want to come out of the loop, or you want to loop through only a certain set of information and you want to come out. Those type of information, you can put a break, or you can put a any kind of condition checking here and you can put a break. So those kind of scenarios, a break statement will come. Okay, what is the next control flow is going to be whenever you have more than right? So a switch is your next set of conditional activity. Now, what will an if statement actually do? If has got 2 choices, okay? But whenever you want to check for 3 choices, how will you make? You won't be able to easily do it, right? So in those kind of scenarios, when you have 2 choices to make, so if I say there's an if statement that I want to make, right? So in my if statement, my condition comes here. So this is in the true block. So if suppose I have an information called if number is equal to 2, or some kind of condition where you go ahead and you want to check 2 conditions in the information. Okay, so you want to check if the number is 1, if the number is 2, or if the number is 3. Okay, say consider you want to, so what you will do, you will check number 1 is equal to 1, correct? So what will happen? If it is 1, it will come here. But after that, you want to check even for 2 and 3. So there are 2 options. So what will you do? You will have a nested if. So again, you will put an if. So if the condition is 1, it will come here. Again, you will put if the number is 2 or 3. So what you will do if the number 1 is equal to 2. So if it is equal to 2, it will come here. If it is equal to 3, it will go here. So again, if you want to check if the number is equal to 3 or 4, again, you will be adding another if, right? So you will be writing again number 2 is equal to, or number 1 is equal to 3. So what you are doing, if the number is 1, you are finding between 4 choices, whether it is 1, 2, 3 or 4. So you put nested if inside. So you can go ahead and put it like this also. Okay. But this is not an ideal way of coding. Suppose you have more than 2 options or more than 3 options. Ideally, we might not be, it might be difficult for us, or it might be taking a lot of time to execute this particular scenario. For this particular, to avoid this particular scenario, we have a switch case. A switch case is nothing but when you have more than 2 choices, which you cannot achieve through a if statement. So at that particular time, you go ahead and you start using your switch case. So this is going to be an advanced of an if statement. So you again have a condition that you need to check, and based on the condition, whether it is true or false, you go ahead and you have your cases defined. So you have your first choice, the second choice, the third choice, and go so on and so forth. You could go ahead and do your choices option. So based on whichever choice is true, it will go to that particular choice and it will go ahead and execute. Okay, so that is your switch case. So a flow decision is again is going to be a similar thing of a flow switch is going to be a similar thing of a flow decision. Again, more visual representation. It is going to be implemented only on a flow chart. So the same thing as that of a flow, as that of a switch. Okay, but it will be in terms of a more visual representation. Okay, visually you will see a better piece of code to view when you're viewing your code. So that is a difference between a switch case and a flow switch. So the flow decision and a flow switch will almost perform together, but here it will have more choices. Here it will have just two choices. Okay, so similar will be the information. Right? So this is your information of your switch case. So now when I need to consider for a switch case, so what will I be doing? So let me show you a switch case with an example. Okay. Let me insert another sequence. Right? So let's assume we have this particular option. So you can do this as an exercise also. I'll just teach you how to do. Based on that, you can go ahead and we can do it as an exercise also. So let's go for the first exercise. Now I want 3 inputs from the user. Okay, this is just a random exercise. You may not have something like this similar to a real-time scenario. Okay, it will be part of a real-time scenario, but you will not have an individual project which is a real-time scenario. So let's go ahead and get 3 inputs from the user. So what are the 3 inputs? You are going to give input 1 is going to be the first number. Let's do a simple number manipulation. Okay, so the first input is going to be your number 1. Okay, the second input is going to be your number 2, and the third input that we need is user has to choose between what kind of operation they want to do, or what kind of operation they want, arithmetic operation they want to perform on the numbers, right? So the third input is going to be a choice input, so where you go and give the multiple choice where the user will be able to select. So it is kind of a drop down kind of a thing. So this is going to be choose the option. Right? So they are going to choose between any one of the information, right? So this is going to be the any one of the information that they will be choosing. So based on the information they do, the first case is going to be, so case 1 is going to be if they choose plus. So if they choose plus, what should I do? I should go ahead and add the number 1 and number 2. So whenever they choose this particular thing, I want an information to be called as result, and I need to do number 1 plus number 2. So case 2 is going to be minus. Here I'm going to do result is equal to number 1 minus number 2. Case 3 is going to be multiplication. So here again we are going to do right. So if you need to achieve it through and I want you to display the result, in whatever case the result should be displayed. And after this, your 6th step is going to be display result. Okay, so this is going to be your information. So how can we achieve this? A simple switch case, right? So let's go ahead and receive your inputs, and then we'll go ahead and talk about the cases. So basically, if you're going to do it with the if, then you're going to put this as the if, the first if, the true section, and then the second if, you'll check for minus the true section, and then you'll again check the third condition. So another if, then you're going to put a star, and the else part of the third if is going to be this division. Okay, so you can achieve it through if as well. This is a simple program, you can achieve it through as if as well. So let's do it with the switch case so that we know what we are actually doing, right? So let's go into switch case. The first thing is we have to take 3 inputs. So whenever you want to receive inputs from the user, okay, you're going to create an input dialog box. You're going to, dialog box is nothing but you're talking with the user. So that is what we call it as a dialog box. So you go ahead and search for input dialog box. There will be an activity that will come up. So input dialog, you can go ahead and drag in. So usually as a recommendation, as a best practice, go ahead and change your name of your activity. Okay, why? Number one point is you might be having 3 input dialog boxes. Okay, say this is your first input, I'm going to take the second input, and I'm going to take the third input from the user. Okay, the error comes at this particular place. The error will still say error at input dialog. Okay, but you won't know in which input dialog the error has occurred. So always, as a best practice, you go ahead and change the names. In real time also we do that. You go ahead and change your names so that whenever an error occurs or whenever you're going to have some kind of an information loss, you can go and touch back to the same position where you actually, so it will actually, instead of it will say, if I give the information as, if I give the information as, okay, automatically my error, when it comes, it is going to come up with the information called the error occurred at input 2. So I can locate this information properly when I'm doing the error handling, right? So that is why we go ahead and change. For most of the times we will be changing for everything. Okay, so I have it as a practice, right? So this is going to be input 1, right? So what is going to be my input box? So the first information of my input box is there's going to be a box that is going to be displayed. So what should be the title of the box? So here I'm going to give the title of the box. See, wherever in your code, okay, wherever it is saying the title of your thing, text must be quoted. So the title, this is your label, the text must be quoted. This is another label, it says text must be quoted. Okay, so whenever you see this kind of a message, text must be quoted means you always need to put it inside a double quotes. It is expecting your information inside double quotes because it is expecting a text information, a string information. Okay, so whenever you see this kind of an information, put your information inside a double quotes, right? So I'm going to say the heading of the box is going to be number manipulation. Okay, so what is the label? What do I need to say to the user? I'm going to say to the user, enter the first number, right? And I'm going to give the option like, do you have a text box to enter the field, or do you want a multiple choice? Here we want only one information. So let's go ahead and put it as text box only, right? So now you have entered. So let me just execute this and I will show you, right? So this is your sequence. Let me connect. So it says number manipulation, enter the first number. I'm entering the first number. Okay. It goes to the next information. Because we did not give anything, it just left off. I'm entering the second number. Okay. Again, I'm entering the third number. So what actually happens is the program is completed. Okay. So what actually happens is the moment I enter this particular information, okay, I'm entering 10. Okay, after that it goes to the next information and I'm entering 20. So what happens to the 10? The 10 is not stored inside any box, so it will get disappeared. Okay, so you need to make sure you're going to, whenever you receive inputs from the user or whenever you receive data inside the program, you're going to make sure you're going to create a variable as a box and you're going to hold this number inside the variable. Okay, so here for sure, whenever you're going to get information, whenever you're doing data processing, data manipulation, wherever you do, we're going to use the concept of holding the data with a variable inside the box, right? So here you're going to create a variable and you're going to hold this number inside the box called the first number or whatever is the name that you give. Okay, so where am I going to give? So here, most of your activities will be having three information in your properties. One is your input, one is your miscellaneous, and one is your output. Okay. Input is going to be for the activity to work. The properties for the activity to actually work. That is going to be your input. Miscellaneous is going to be any other options that you require as a part of your activity to work. Okay. These are not supposed to be by hearted, so it comes with practice. Output is going to be what is the output of this particular activity? Do I need to store some information? Not every time you need to go and give an output field. It's okay. You can still leave it blank. But whenever you're receiving an information, you need to make sure you choose or you create a box and you hold the particular output inside that particular box. Okay. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create the variable to actually go ahead and store it inside the box. So first I'm going to create the box called, this is going to be first number. Okay. And I'm going to put it for the switch sequence. So I'm creating the box. This is going to be, since it is going to be numbers, I'm going to give it as integer 32. Okay. So here I have created the box. Now the box is empty, right? Now I am getting the information from this particular box only, this particular input dialog. So which means I need to load the data of 10 into this box. Where I can load it in the output section. Okay. So here, if you go ahead and put the first number as the information, automatically whatever the user enters automatically will be coming and sitting into this particular box. Okay. Now your data will not be lost. So every time you receive inputs or every time you're doing data manipulations, you need to create a variable and hold the information. You can create the variable directly here, or you can create the variable directly here. So let's go do the same thing for the next information. So this is your input to the same dialog box. So this is also number manipulation. So this is going to be enter the second number. Right? So this is also going to be a text box. And here I'm going to create another variable or another box to store the second number. So I'm going to go and do the shortcut Control K. Control K. Control K, and I'm going to give second number. So automatically the information is created, and I'm going to have this as created as a string. So let me go ahead. Default information that gets created is a string information. So what will now happen? The input dialog box, the second dialog box, whatever the user enters is going to come ahead and sit on this particular second number. Okay. So you have the first number received, the second number received, and placed inside the corresponding boxes. So here we are going to go for the third input. So the third input dialog box is going to be input 3. Right? So here also we are going to have the same title. We are going to give it as number manipulation. But here what am I going to say? I'm going to give the choice to the customer to choose. So it is my options which I need to ask the customer to, or the end user to actually choose. Right? So it is going to be select the mode of operation or select the operand. Okay. So here I'm not going to anymore have it as a text box. I'm going to have multiple choice. Okay. The moment you choose multiple choice, there is another information you receive. So this is going to be input options separate with a semicolon, right? So you go ahead and separate your options. You can create it as comma, minus, multiplication, and a division. Okay. So you can create it like this also. So you have because there's an option called text must be quoted. Right? So we have 4 options left. Before I did not give a double quote, so it was throwing an error. Right? So you have all the 4 options available. So now what you're going to do, the user is going to choose only one of the 4 options. So based on that only, I'm going to decide what is the kind of operation I'm going to do, right? So what I will do, just as I inserted input 1 and as first number, just as I had the input 2 as my second number, I'm going to also store the information that the user selects, right? So if the user selects plus, I need to know that the next operation, the user selected plus, so I need to go into the plus section, correct? So that choice will come only based on what the user selects, and I need to pass that information to the next step. Only then I will be able to choose between whether he selected plus or whether he selected minus or whatever, correct? So similarly, we are going to create another information or another variable called str, because it is a special character. I'm giving a prefix of str. Okay, so this is going to be str operand, right? So whatever is out of the 4 choices, whatever the customer selects, that is going to be available into this particular box. So before, if I don't do this, whatever you choose will get disappeared. It will not be held inside the program. So now you got, so let me put a message box and I will show it to you. So inside the message box, I'm going to say, what are the information? I'm going to display the first number, concatenate the second number. I'm going to display everything into one message box. Okay, so I'm giving a concatenation. A plus is going to be a concatenation. I'm going to give a comma in between. So it is like, okay. So if you want to display only the first number, you go and give it like this. If you want to display the same the same message box to have more than one information, you give a concatenation. When you give plus in a message box, it's going to be a concatenation. Okay, concatenation, double quotes. I'm going to give a space and a comma, space, again a concatenation, second number, concatenation, and what is your str operand. So now what will be your display will be, it will be like first number 10, comma, the second number, comma, whatever is your operand you're choosing. Okay. This is an inbuilt parameter that I am giving. It is my choice. Okay. So whenever you want to give your choice information, if you want to give something like you want to enter ES, whatever you want to enter, you give it inside a double quotes and inside a double concatenation. If you don't have any information after this, then if you do not have this information after this, you can simply stop it here. Okay. Right. So always when you have something, you need to make sure it needs to be in the same format. If you're putting it inside a string, everything should be in the string format. If you're putting it as an integer, everything should be the integer format. Okay. So here it's a special character, so I won't be able to convert it into an integer format. So I converted the numbers to a string format, right? So that is what now let me go and execute. You'll be receiving 3 inputs. So this is going to be my first number 10. It's going to be stored into a variable. My second number is 20. It's going to be stored into another variable. And here I'm going to select, I'm going to choose between the 4 options that I have. So I'm going to give the multiplication. So if you see, all the 3 options that we stored it inside a variable is now getting displayed. If I don't store it into the variable, the next step itself, it will get disappeared. It won't be held inside the memory of the program, right? So far it should be clear. Fine. Now we are going to get into the next step. So we got the information. We are going to choose between the choices, right? So your case 1, your case 2, your case 3, case 4. Now what are all these cases? All these cases are actually coming from based on the third input that we are getting. So which means whatever is your information. So here our third input was basically str underscore operand, right? So this is your third input. So based on your third input only, your switch case operates, correct? So we will be out of the 4, you're going to load 1. And this, if you pass here only, that one, the case will be going, correct? So the same thing only we are going to use. So here I'm going to put a switch. Okay. So the switch also, it requires an expression. So what is the choice that you're going to pass? Okay. So from where do I need to get the information? So you cannot pass the first number as a switch. We don't have that choice. So basically any one of the input that you make that particular information load onto this particular information only is your expression. Okay. So you go ahead and you put this information, str operand. Okay. So if your str operand is plus, it will go to the plus section. If your str operand is minus, it will go to the minus section. If your str operand is a multiplication, it needs to go to your multiplication section. Okay. So usually whatever is your choice that you're going to give, that choice needs to come here. If you're loading into a variable, the same variable needs to come here in your switch. Okay. Now here again, it throws an error. So what is this particular error? Again, a switch case is going to be similar to a for each control. It is a generic switch that will work for whether the information is integer or whether the information is a string or whether the information is something else. Okay. So again, you have an option called type argument. So the first type argument that we saw was in the for each control. So here you gave the type argument information. Why we gave type argument? Because it is not explicitly doing only for one information. In a data table, it is doing only for data table data. But here it is generic. It could be array, list, dictionary, or whatever. So you went ahead and said, this is my kind of data. So you process this data, right? So the similar thing, you're going to go ahead and say, this is my kind of data. So you're going to pass this particular information. Okay. So the second activity that involves a type argument is going to be the switch case. We just have one more activity which will have a type argument. Other than that, you need not remember this. Okay. So type argument usually comes with three activities. The first activity is a for each control. The second activity is going to be a switch case. Switch case and a flow switch will have a type argument because both has the same information. Both does the same thing, right? And the third activity is we'll see in the upcoming classes. Right? So you just have to remember this alone. If you don't change this, then you're not going to have your code getting executed. Okay. So now what is the information am I passing? I'm passing plus minus whatever, right? So if it is plus, I'm passing plus. If it is minus, I'm passing minus, which means it is a special character. So str operand is a string variable. So you go and you choose string variable. So if you see, automatically the error is gone. Okay. So what kind of data are you going to pass? What type of argument are you going to pass? So if it is a string data, you choose string. So if you have an option like, in case instead of this, if you have an option called 1, 2, 3 or whatever, this is going to be integer option. So here, if you have integer, you give that particular information and you choose it as integer here. Okay. So depending on whatever is your choice, you need to go ahead and give your information in your type argument. So here we are storing it as a string variable. So which means string only is going to be entered here. So which means plus is going to be entered here. Minus is going to be entered here. So you go ahead and change it to a string information. Okay. So what is your case one? Your case one is going to be when plus is passed. Right. So when plus is passed, I go click here. What is the first case? When plus is received. So you go and give it as plus. Right? So when I receive plus, what should I do? I'm going to say result is equal to first number plus second number. So I'm going to go ahead and assign. We do not have a variable called result. So I'm going to go ahead and say int underscore result. So a new variable gets created and it gets created as a string. We are going to do numbers, right? So I'll make it as number information. Okay. So int result is equal to the first number plus the second number. So this is your case one, right? So when plus is getting passed. So if you pass, the options only need to be passed as your cases. Okay. So if you pass here instead of this, if you're going to pass it as 1, 2, 3, then here also it should be 1, 2, and 3. So whatever information you're passing in your str operand only should be coming as case. This is going to be your end result. Right? So what is your second case? I forgot to change this. So this is changed to, right? So for what is your second case? Your second case is minus. So again, the same thing with a minus, right? So you go copy that. Control C, Control V. So here I'm going to do a minus. And the third case is going to be a multiplication. So when you're passing multiplication, right? So again, it's going to be so it's a multiplication. The fourth case is going to be division. Okay, so it accepts this way, right? So whatever you pass, that will be your case. So if you pass plus, then it will come to the plus and it will do this and it will come out. Though no other cases, it will execute. Okay. Now you're going to display the result. So here, how will you display the result at the end of, because everywhere you're going to, here also you can display as int result, message box int result. The same thing you're going to display it here also. So I'm going to go ahead and store it as int result. So here is your result that gets displayed, right? So what happens is you got your information. Based on your information, you're choosing your choices. What if the user does not select anything? The third input, the user is not selecting anything. Okay. So which means this will be coming as 0, null, right? So it will not go to this, 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 and finally it will say end result is equal to 0, right? So you should also have a default case every time if the user does not select anything. So that is why you have something called a default. So in the default, if the user does not select anything, you need to say, please select something, right? So the default case is nothing but if none of the choices are not eligible, if none of the choices are given by the user, or if none of the choices are active. So at that time, you go for the default case. So here in the default case, what should the program do when none of the options are selected? So I'm going to say, please choose the operand. Right? Let me go ahead and execute. So this is your first number, 20. Your second number, which is 30. And I'm choosing a plus, the first option, which means it should come to the first case or the plus case, not first case, the plus case. So it is displaying what are the information and I chose plus. So it is going to the switch case, it did the addition and it is displaying me the result. Okay. Same thing in the flow switch, it will be like this option. So here flows, instead of flow decision, you will have flow switch. You will have a default option, case plus, case minus, and a case multiplication and a case division. You can have how many ever number of cases, the branching will go in that particular order. Okay.